The fire was already dying down, but she stood barefoot at its edge, wrapped in a thin shawl that clung to her shoulders like it was afraid to let go. Smoke curled up around her legs, as if the earth itself was trying to keep her there. Behind her, the hills were quiet, and even the coyotes had the decency to stay silent. She turned her face toward the wind and said it so softly that he almost didn't catch it. "Please don't tell anyone what you saw tonight." The rancher didn't reply right away. He just looked at her the way men look at storms on the horizon, like they're trying to measure how close they'll come and whether it's worth staying out in the open. His hat was low, shadowing half his face, and the other half wasn't giving away anything either. He tipped it once, slow and deliberate, like sealing a deal without needing words. Then he turned back toward his horse. She didn't follow. She didn't have to. Her message was as clear as the cracked desert floor. This was something buried deep, and the less said, the better. The rancher mounted without a sound. The saddle creaked once, and the horse gave a low grunt. Then they disappeared into the dark like they were never there. The embers hissed, and the wind picked up just enough to scatter the ash. Nobody in town asked where he'd gone that night, and nobody saw her again. Folks around here know better than to press too hard. The desert has a way of keeping secrets for those who treat it right, and punishing those who don't. Still, whispers started. They always do. And the more someone doesn't talk about something, the more people want to know. They say she wasn't from around here. Just showed up one morning, barefoot even then, standing in front of the old water tower like she'd been drawn there in her sleep. No wagon, no bags. Just a necklace with a copper coin and a smile that didn't touch her eyes. The barkeep swore she never paid for her drinks, but also that nobody ever asked her to. She just had a way about her. The rancher saw her once before that night. Or at least, that's what folks figured. They say he stopped outside the chapel one Sunday, didn't go in, just stood under the eaves and watched the dust float in the sunlight through the open doors. She was singing, they say, not a hymn, something older, sadder. Nobody knew the words, but it stuck in your head like a thorn. He never asked her name, and she never gave it. But when he saw her again, out by the edge of his property, near the rocks that looked like sleeping giants, she was crying. Not loud, just leaking like a broken jar. She said one thing that day. "You ever hear silence so loud it makes your bones hum?" Then she walked away. People think cowboys ride with empty hearts. Truth is, most of them just carry too much. And the rancher, well, he had his own history. A burned-out barn near the old creek. A brother no one spoke about. A letter he never sent, folded so many times the ink had faded. He kept it in his coat pocket, even in the summer. There's a tree out past the ridge. Twisted thing, half dead and half clinging to life. Some say that's where the old stories go to die. They say the bark is etched with time, not just in rings or cracks, but in things you wouldn't notice unless you stared too long. Names, symbols, shapes that don't quite make sense in daylight. The rancher would ride out there sometimes, alone, and just sit beneath it like he was listening to something no one else could hear. He'd bring no tools, no flask, not even his dog, just himself and the silence. He did that the morning after he saw her by the fire. Sat there until dusk, then rode back like nothing had happened. Didn't speak a word when he came into town, but the dust on his boots told a story anyway. But the next week, a stranger came to town. Tall, sharp eyes, boots too clean. The kind of clean that doesn't belong out here. Not in this land where the dust knows everyone's name. He asked questions like he already knew the answers. Showed folks a picture, but never let them look too long. Just a flash of parchment, faded and creased, like it had been folded 1,000 times and carried close to the heart, or something colder. Said he was looking for someone who didn't belong. Didn't say why. Just smiled too much. Too wide. Like someone who'd forgotten how to mean it. The rancher watched him from the saloon porch. Didn't say a word. Just tipped his chair back slightly and let the sun hit his eyes through the brim of his hat. When a stranger tipped his hat and asked if he'd seen anyone unusual, the rancher just squinted at the sun and muttered, "Ain't we all a little strange out here?" The stranger chuckled, but there was ice behind his teeth. A sharp glint that didn't match the warmth in the air. He stayed a few seconds too long, as if waiting for the rancher to flinch, to blink, to break. But the rancher just sat there, unmoved. And that silence said more than any answer could have. That night, the wind changed. Cold rolled in off the mountains, and coyotes howled like they were warning someone to leave while they still could. The desert has its own way of speaking. Howls, creaks, shifting shadows. The rancher didn't sleep. Just sat by the window, rifle across his lap, staring out like he expected someone or something to come for him. He wasn't paranoid. Out here, instincts are scripture. He wasn't wrong. She came again, barefoot and silent, just after midnight. Knocked once, then slipped inside like a shadow. Her hair was wet, though there hadn't been rain in days. Maybe weeks. She looked at him like she didn't expect him to still be there. Like she thought the land would have swallowed him whole by now. "He's getting close," she whispered. "And when he finds me, it'll be bad for everyone." He didn't ask who. Didn't need to. The answer was already out there, pacing in the dark, watching the house with a smile too sharp. He just handed her a blanket and nodded toward the rocking chair. She sat without a word, and for a long time, the only sound was the wind pressing against the walls. Then she said it again. "Please, don't tell anyone what you saw tonight." And the way she said it this time, it wasn't a request. It was a warning, like thunder before the lightning, like the hush before the shot. The next morning, the stranger's horse was found just outside town, riderless. No tracks, no blood, just the saddle turned sideways and a single copper coin in the dirt. Not just any coin, it was old. Worn smooth, except for one thing scratched deep into its center, a spiral. It caught the early sunlight like a warning, like a whisper from something that didn't want to be forgotten. Folks talk, but not too loud. That's how it works in places like this. Speak too loud about shadows, and they start listening. People here knew better than to dig where the ground didn't want to be turned. They'd seen what happened when curiosity won over caution. The memories stayed in the corners of their eyes, in the weight of quiet glances across poker tables and bar stools. The sheriff came by later, asking if anyone saw anything. The rancher just tipped his hat and said, "Saw a hawk this morning. Circling low. Might be something dead out by the hills." The sheriff nodded. That was enough. Out here, you don't press past what's offered. The unspoken truths are the ones that carry weight. The kind that bend backs and close mouths. He didn't ask twice. He just looked toward the hills and scratched at the back of his neck like something was crawling on it. Then he left the coin where it lay. Some things you don't pocket. Not if you want to sleep easy. She was gone again by then. Left before dawn, same way she arrived. No trail, no goodbye. Just a scent in the air like rosemary and smoke. That scent clung to the porch rails and wrapped around the rocking chair like a shawl on an old widow. The chair still rocked for a while after she left, like her presence lingered a bit longer than her body. Some say it still rocks every now and then, when the moon's just right and the wind smells like her. You don't look too close when it does. You just let it be, because out here, we respect what doesn't want to be seen. A child once tried to sit in that chair on a dare. The boy's hair turned white before sundown. He didn't speak for 3 days. When he finally did, all he said was, "She ain't gone," and nobody asked him what he meant. Years passed. The tree near the ridge finally died, and the chapel burned down one night with no explanation. Some said lightning. Others whispered darker things, about things that move through dry grass without a sound, or sing through the cracks of old windows. People rebuilt the chapel, but the music never sounded the same. The hymns were still sung, but the echoes didn't carry like before. Like something sacred had been lost. Like even the walls remembered what happened there. The rancher got older. Slower. His boots dragged more than they clacked. But he never stopped riding out to that ridge. Never stopped glancing toward the fire pit where the ash never fully faded. Every week, like a ritual, like a prayer. The fire was long gone, but he still looked for smoke. He never told anyone why. The townsfolk stopped asking. They'd seen too many things they couldn't explain and learned to stop chasing the wind. But they noticed. They noticed how the air around that ridge stayed colder, how the birds never sang when he was there. Some folks still ask about her. Quietly, over whiskey, when the night's too long and the wind won't let them sleep. They ask what she was running from, or what she brought with her. But no one ever gets a straight answer, because he never told them. He never told anyone what he saw that night. And maybe that's why the land still respects him. Why the storms split around his house. Why coyotes never come too close. Because he kept the promise. Or maybe because he understood. Sometimes the most dangerous thing a man can carry is the truth. A story not meant for daylight. Something with teeth. He carried it the way old men carry war wounds. Not with pride, not with regret, just with the quiet acceptance of someone who knows it'll never leave. A weight that shaped his back and hardened his eyes. He wore silence like armor. They say there are stories too old to be written, too heavy to be spoken. Stories you only hear in the spaces between thunder and memory. Stories that find the right ears and whisper themselves into the soul. They choose you, not the other way around. And once they settle in, you don't shake them. You carry them. Carefully, quietly, like a lantern in a long tunnel. This was one of them. It doesn't begin at the campfire or end with a bullet. It breathes. It watches. It waits. And when it chooses to rise again, it does so in ways you might not recognize until it's too late. A creaking door, a coin in the dirt, a name you haven't heard in years whispered like it never left your skin. And if it ever finds you, all I ask is that you remember what she said. Don't tell anyone what you saw, not unless you're ready for what comes next. Because stories like these don't fade, they wait. They nest in the bones of dry land and ride on the backs of crows. And when the wind turns just so, when the moon tilts sideways and the stars look unfamiliar, that's when you'll know. It's come back around. So if something in this story stirred the dust in your chest, if it made you think of silence that speaks louder than thunder, of folks who carry secrets heavier than saddlebags, then maybe this ain't the only story you're meant to hear. Go on, tap that subscribe button like you're tipping your hat to the next tale, one that might just find you when you need it most. Because out here, we don't just bury what's broken. We remember it, and we tell it true. Stick around. There's more coming. And some stories. They don't end. They just ride on. If this tale stirred something in you, don't keep it buried. Share it with someone who still believes in the power of a good story. And if you're hungry for more like it, you know where to find us. There are still tales left to be told. Out past the ridge, beneath twisted trees and forgotten stars. You just have to be willing to listen. And when you do, don't look away.